Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in saddle once again for another season. And before I introduce my guests, I do want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by my friend Preston Poulter's book, Palace of the Golden Princess, which offers a fun, sexy romp through a fantasy RPG setting run by women. Issue 3 is on Kickstarter right now. And for those who are interested in trying before they buy, if you sign up for Preston's email list at pocketjackcomics.com, you can get a free PDF copy of issue 1 sent to your email. And I don't back all that many Kickstarters, as people know, but I did back this one, and you can check my record on Kickstarter under Pop Anime Comics. And it is awesome because he's got some sick covers by Whiskey Paint. But enough about that, because I have with me comic creators Joe Solzis, I want to say, and Rogos. I think. Correct me if I mispronounce your names. I apologize.
It's okay. It's Solis. I always tell people it's like police, but with an S. So.
I stand corrected. But obviously, I have two of the people who are behind the comics issue / anthology of Child's Play comic issue number 0, which is funding on Kickstarter right now. So before we get too deep into this book, what is the basic concept? Because some people know your book, you're going to see this, and a bunch of people probably do not. And so what is the basic concept of the book? So everybody's on the same page before we really get into it, because it's a fun book.
Sure. Yeah. No. So Child's Play Comics is mine and my wife's company. And me and Roy actually self-published our first comic through it actually back in 2021. And then fast forward to this year is when we started opening up, going back to cons and whatnot. And so we self-published a couple more issues, and doing it at cons or our own website. Me and my wife actually used to own a comic and game store in our town, so we had a pretty good following, and thankfully we got a good group of friends that all kind of supported us up to that point. And so we've been talking about and learning about, I'd been on Kickstarter for over 12 years now, just for random things, more board games because my wife's into that. But I was a comic book guy in our store. So we were like, I got to know a lot of creators through Kickstarter, through seeing their projects, through backing them, through actually getting to talk to some of them, through actually getting to carry some of their books on our website. So it's just been this long journey to Kickstarter of like, well, are we going to try it? Like, are we going to add this as an avenue now to get our books out there? So Child's Play Comic 0 is a collection of all the books that we have self-published so far, kind of as an introduction to the Kickstarter crowd, and say, hey, look, we've done some stuff. We like to think we know what we're doing. And so here's a book that kind of showcases all that. We specialize in like all ages and teen titles. And then we also are going to be showcasing one of our friends' upcoming books in there. So for people who already had some of the stuff in the collection, they will get something new with this book as well. So that's the book in a nutshell.
So let's actually talk a little bit about this, because before we dive into the 3/4 stories that are in here, let's actually talk about the journey a little bit, because I think it's interesting that, and this is my experience, is that a lot of people sometimes are first-time creators and they haven't backed anything. And then there's people who have come from the outside, and there's people who have obviously backed stuff and then wanted to do a comic, and then they've come into Kickstarter. So what has this been like? Because obviously having experience coming into, being a fan, and obviously also having retail experience, having board game experience, being in pop culture, what has that been like? Because you have a very different journey inward versus somebody who says, I just want to create a comic, and they haven't touched retail. Obviously, I buy and sell a lot of books on eBay. I run a business comic book oriented around selling a lot of variants and things of that nature. So I have also a very different view. So I'm very curious what that is like, because it does change the way you approach things and analyze things. And hopefully, and maybe I'm mistaken here, but there's, I believe, more of a business sense to what you're doing at this point. So what has that been like before we get into the story? Because I think that's actually really interesting about what you two have done, and along with your wife.
Sure. Yeah. So if you want to know like the retail and the business side, that alone was a dream that I didn't think we'd ever do either. My wife had actually helped a friend of hers run a game shop where we used to live up in Dallas. And so she got experience kind of seeing the ins and outs of it like that. And then when we moved down here towards the Austin area near where Roy lives, we were talking about it, and we're like, well, what let's kind of take the baby steps, right? So back then it was like, okay, let's do it, but we're not going to do a brick and mortar yet. We're just going to hit up every con that we can. We're gonna use whatever distributors allow us, because a lot of distributors won't touch you if you don't have a brick and mortar yet. So we just pretty much worked with the ones that we could for 2 years, and we've set up everywhere and anywhere. I mean, it wasn't just cons. I mean, even at our local GameStop, if they had a big release night, they would let us set up a booth. And we had a local pizza place that had a back party room, and we would set up game nights once a month. So it's like slowly but surely we would kind of build up that following. So when after 2 years of that in our town, then we finally decided to start looking for a place. And then of course the struggle was, well, who's going to give us a chance, because they want to see money in the bank, but they also want proof that we're going to pay the rent for the next year or whatever they sign us on. And thankfully we found a place that allowed that, and we ran that place for 2 years. So it's now to your question of what the point of view, I guess, is that obviously I got to experience the fun of working with Diamond when they were the only distributor back before COVID. I would say I'm pretty fortunate though, because I have other friends who've told me horror stories. I think the worst horror story I had was a UPS guy dropped my box and messed up my comics, and that was the worst thing that happened in 2 years. So I was pretty fortunate.
So obviously, what's up, Kyle? Kyle runs a shop down in Florida dealing with
nice.
And he's gonna be at New York Comic Con.
Nice.
He was just commenting because he's interested in a pizza game night, but because that actually sounds like a lot of fun. He eats some pizza, play some board games, have a good time. Sounds like actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I kind of want to do it. I might steal that idea.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Totally. I mean, I would just do it like once every other month. Oh, it'd be such a fun time. Like run a firehouse and go deep. But I do want to dive into this because obviously going from retail to creating a comic is a very different beast. But for me, obviously, I haven't created a comic yet, and I don't know if I ever will. But when I do, and if I go down that path, given that I do sell a lot of books on eBay and I understand how to run a business, and I learned the hard knocks way. What has that been like? Because I think it's really interesting, because understanding how a comic shop works, understanding how a board game shop works, because I feel a lot of people come to comic creation without any business sense. And I don't think that you came in, because I think you came in the other way where you were running a business dealing with board games and comics. And that's what I think is so interesting about your journey into creator own now, because that's what's the shift, in my opinion, is, and I think it's a much, I'm trying to do the words here. It is a skill to understand business in comics is the best way how I can describe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, when the time came in 2018, we had to sell it, I had to prove that it was profitable to the person who bought it. And we did, thankfully. And, before COVID, I was a banker for 10 years. So I had that aspect going on too. I always tell people I was a banker by day, nerd by night, and yeah, it was just a matter of not being overzealous. And I guess that's the thing too, like with this, Roy, obviously the creative side, he's the one doing the art. And then whenever we talk about, okay, like, what are we going to do? Like the first one, for example, the first book, we looked at Comics Wellspring, and the smallest book they could print was an 8-pager. So we were like, let's do that. Let's just see if we can do it, And then we had to figure out, okay, how much can we sell it for realistically, even though it's 8 pages, and still make a tiny bit of profit. And so those are the kind of things we had to look at. And still do.
Let's actually go into this, and we're going to table the business stuff because I want to get into your book. And obviously, it's 3 separate stories. So I think it's How to Hunt a Hero #0. I also think that it is Malia Mayhem, and I think it is Teen Strike. It is the 3rd main book, and then I don't know what the 4th book preview is in this book, but I'm sure you guys are going to educate me on that one. I might have missed it in the campaign. But what is this like to do? Obviously, because I think all of these, at least I know that um the first one, How to Hunt a Hero, has been published before and is being republished. But how did this idea come about to do three stories in an anthology type book on
Yeah.
Kickstarter? Because that's what I think is interesting at this point now, and to remaster them, make them better, update them, re-letter them, clean it up a little bit. And how did that idea come about? And even what was that undertaking for you guys?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Roy take this one, but yeah, I must have misspoken. It is just the three stories. You said them all. It's How to Hunt a Hero, Malia Mayhem, and Teen Strike. But Roy's actually the one who came up with the original idea for How to Hunt a Hero. So I'm gonna let him share that.
Okay, cool. Hey guys, I'm Rogo or Roy. Joe and I actually go back, like he said, it feels like forever. Met in college, and shortly after we met and became friends, we started pitching. We're both into like pop, into video games and toy collecting and all that stuff that makes what I consider geek pop culture great, just the fun stuff. And we started pitching an idea of like, well, hey, we both came from loving stuff from Image to Marvel to DC and all that, but especially Image at the time. And we wanted to pitch, just come up with a story, something fun, something unique, kind of put our hat in the ring, if you will, just for fun to see if we could do it. And originally it was actually called Average Joe. And we, through the years, have tried to pitch it different ways, trying to figure out how to make this come to life. We started off almost as a kind of a Sunday comic strip because I grew up. Both of us are actually influenced a lot by Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes, and the Sunday comic format. So we tried it that way, kind of these short stories, quick little stories. Joe would write them, kind of give me a draft of what we wanted to do, and then I would, back in the day, I would actually pencil them and ink them, color them, and we would put a little collection together, hoping to make basically our own little, like a little ash can that we could promote somewhere, and this is before, I think, at least for me, before online was like a thing, like it's just seeming to blow up because, before I'm very low tech, Joe's very high tech. But it was like, how do we distribute this? And I remember back then, it was this idea of like, well, we'll go to the cons and we'll like, get a table and like start kind of like pitching this to other artists, to other, get feedback and stuff like that. But fast forward a couple of years, we've gone through a couple of different iterations of this book, and actually I think we jumped. I mean, honestly, it's been years. It's been years. We eventually, right around COVID, we kind of got this idea, or maybe it was me. I don't know, kind of where this happened, but it just seemed to work. We decided to take the idea and kind of flip it on its head, and actually make the villain in the story the protagonist. And it just kind of clicked. I remember I was watching this movie and I forget the movie right now, and I just recently saw it, where there's this character, the main character is like basically fighting or collecting creatures or something like that. I forget what the original story was, but it just kind of came together. They just like clicked that night. And I remember pitching the idea to Joe, and I was like, well, what if we do this? I'm a big, I love cryptids, things like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, that kind of thing. I like ghost hunting, all those kind of supernatural things, whatever, all that. And I just remember pitching and saying, hey, what if we make her, where she actually goes and captures these creatures? And Joe, right on, I mean, he got it. He understood it, and it just, it clicked with him. And so he started kind of like coming back with stuff, and we just decided to change the story. Like I said, flip it over and made her the main character of this book. And How to Hunt a Hero was born, basically. We changed the title, and we just kind of just kept developing her because we already had a pretty good idea of all these characters. Some of them are actually based on friends, and actually Joe, the main, the hero of the book, is actually an amalgamation of me and Joe. He's a very unique individual. He's into the same stuff we are. Yeah. Kind of based on some of his experiences that we went through, either through childhood and up into college. And this is set. We actually set this in like a college setting. The main characters are all in college. This is more geared towards teens. And I wanted to do something fun where I was like, it would be really cool if this character like fought Bigfoot, just something that I can just really let loose and just have fun with as an artist, as a creator. And Joe, would go and he would, kind of like give me like a skeleton of the story. We have like point A, point B, point C, and here, you can fill in the gaps, with what you want to do with, go nuts. And so that's what I would do. I'd go in there and just kind of play with the idea.
Let's actually talk a little bit about this because
Yeah.
it's really interesting, right? Because obviously, there's a girl and she likes a boy,
Mhm.
and she's a cryptid hunter.
Yes.
And so she's capturing these monsters, and then she basically takes their powers and injects him with it in
Right.
hopes that he likes her
Right.
for doing it. And I'm not too sure if that's exactly what happens, and then she might become the villain, or she just might be stepping aside. But obviously, it's a love story, and then it's also a superhero story.
Right.
It's also getting attention, and there's a lot of stuff being played with here on just kind of boy likes girl, flip it a little bit up. You got monsters in there, you got Bigfoot, you got some other things in there. Obviously, what it means to be a superhero is in there as well. But also, it's not an adult book either, meaning that, it's 11, 12, maybe 14 years old, where you're not going to drop an F-bomb in this book
No.
so quickly. Maybe every once in a while you could sneak it in there,
Right.
kind of like Fast and Furious. You get one of them, and it's all right. It's all right. You get one a movie, but what is that like? Because you're obviously hitting a niche that is not really, I guess, targeted, that needs comics and wants comics, and it's also a healthy story to some degree.
Right. And I'll just continue a little bit of this, and I'll give it to Joe because actually Joe has a really good grasp on this. But yeah, I think it's really neat that we're able to do this. To, like you said, we're not dropping F bombs, and even like the fights and stuff, they're not like super gory and like that. They're just action. The way I always describe it when people ask about it, I kind of say it's kind of a rom com action. So you've got the comedy with Joe and his close friends, who, like I said, are based on two of our good friends. And then you have the action. Like, that's what I want to see. That's what I want to get. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of the book, and let's see these fights. Let's see this, how this all shakes out, with the main character Ava, or Avarice. She's basically almost an evil Batman / Iron Man. She has this unlimited wealth thanks to her father, who is basically just doesn't really want her around, and says, "Here's this money. Just go away. Do whatever you want." And so she decides, I'm going to go ahead and kind of follow the Batman path, at least in this world. She starts to train with hunters and all kinds of different people that can give her all these skills that she needs. She's very goal oriented, very focused on what she wants to do, and she does it. And if anything gets in her way, she throws money at it, or she just overcomes. She adapts and she overcomes. And so she basically starts to hunt these cryptids, but she builds these suits, and she learns, and she'll actually lose a couple of these, but she always comes back stronger. So like I said, she adapts, so we get to see that aspect of her. You're going to see a lot of that in the books as we go. We have, stories and specific creatures she'll be fighting and how they'll actually be adapted to Joe. She takes, her whole goal basically is to take those powers, like you said, and inject them. In our world, the creatures have what we quote unquote call superpowers. Each one has a special gift, and she's able to take them and put them into Joe, fulfilling his dream of becoming a superhero, and in our world, the world's first superhero. But Joe, I'll let you go ahead and talk a little bit on this, to kind of fill in the gaps there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it, like Roy said, it was always one of those things like where we had Joe's origin, and 20 years later, after discussing it, all the Marvel movies had come out, all the DC movies. So it's like you've seen that origin story so many times at this point. So flipping it on its head, and we're basically like, okay, she knows him. She knows how to set up this narrative, right? She knows all the beats of a classic origin story, and she's like, okay, so first, he gets the powers. I know his two best friends. You got the voice of reason best friend, and you've got the best friend who's egging him on. It's like, no, let's do this. Let's make a costume. I'll be your sidekick. Like Like she knows that all that's already in place, and she's just kind of feeding that narrative. And then as she sends one cryptid after the other to test him to see how he's doing, and then at the very end, like Roy mentioned, she has her different suits. The newest one she has, she's going to create this villain persona for him, she's going to call herself the Dark Wraith. And so now he has an arch nemesis, and so like she calls this whole thing Operation Origin. Like she's controlling everything that's happened. And it's with this idea that, well, when I finally tell him it was me that made your dreams come true, I made you a superhero, aren't you? Now we can be together forever. It's not one of those that she's like gonna die without him or whatever. It's not dumb love. It's I've decided I want you, and I'm gonna get you, and there's nobody's gonna stop me. It's that type of attitude. So
see, this is interesting, right? Because obviously there's a lot of things that can happen.
Mhm.
And obviously this is a preview issue or an ash can type issue. So this is an entry point in. And
Right.
that's interesting. And I'm going to table that for 1 second or for a little bit, because I do want to come back to this, because I think this is actually really interesting on a business level. But I do want to jump into another story that's also in here that obviously a bunch of my friends would enjoy, because I have friends who do some board game stuff, and that's Malia Mayhem. And obviously this one is definitely tabletop-esque, to say the least, where a 9-year-old girl is magically teleported into a world where tabletop is pretty much king, for lack of a better word. And then she has to defeat a troll to save the whole Tabletopia, I guess, or Topia, or I don't know how to say the name, guys.
That's
okay.
It's a little tricky. To save that whole realm. But the kicker is that she has to play by the rules of the board game she's on or in and that world. And so what is this like? Because obviously selling board games, playing a lot of board games, being involved in doing that, different rules, different subsections, all that stuff. What is that like to bring it into the comic realm? Because D&D stuff is popular. Board games are bigger than ever. Obviously, my friend Preston Poulter based his whole game off his comic off of the first TSR done by a woman. So obviously, and he's sponsoring this episode and a bunch of episodes for me. So what is that like to touch upon that, and also have a female lead, and also have it child friendly? Because you got like a bunch of stuff in there that's really interesting.
Yeah, Malia is actually based on my wife. It's basically a kid version of her, because her middle name is Malia, and so that's why I made the character's name. Malia Mayhem is actually her cosplay character name, because if you're part of that culture, some people make their original characters. So we're like, well, if you're a 9-year-old girl and you like that, you're going to make up your own character. And just like my wife, she loves tabletop. She loves going to Comic-Con. So we just basically wrapped all that up into the character. And that character was actually the mascot of our store that we had. And so even back then, I had an artist friend of mine draw up a 6-panel origin story for her, and we put it up on a poster, and it was up in the shop, and people were asking all the time, well, that's cool, are you ever going to make a comic of that? And lo and behold, it took a lot longer than we wanted, but that was always the idea. And yeah, it was the town we're in is very family centered, so us being a family centric store like that, anything that showed that we were family friendly like that was definitely a plus and something in our favor. So to make the comic all ages was a no-brainer. And obviously it's one of those things like you're talking about. If you have people who like tabletop, they'll get a lot of in jokes and stuff like that, so it's kind of like when you watch a kids movie and you're like, well, that was really cool, but that joke was in there because for the parents, like that's kind of where we're going with it. And so that way everybody can enjoy it. And obviously the adults are going to pick up on, well, which game are they really talking about here? Obviously we can't use the official names, right? But obviously the first issue there, she falls into a world that's essentially D&D. And
so let me ask this, because, and I'm curious, because obviously, and feel free to disagree with me, because this is my thoughts, is that tabletopping was popular, and then I felt it fell a little out because I came in a little bit later. I came in kind of my first year in college, which was almost like 9, 10 years ago. Maybe 7. I don't know. I'm 30. I graduated. Oh yeah, it was about 9 years ago. Who am I kidding? Wow, I can't do math. This is why I'm an interviewer. I'm not. I'd be a fine banker, but I really can't act. You guys owe us $1 million. What? Like the interest rate was 0.0. No, you owe me $2 million now. No, want to try again, sir? You want to make it 3? Because I could put a 3 there anytime.
Yeah.
You can say it. No. All jokes aside, when was this actually created? Because in my opinion, tabletopping was popular, then it fell off, and then COVID, I felt, brought it back, and D&D came back, and so. When was this actually written? And was it written during sort of the COVID era when all this was getting popular? Or was it written a little bit before? And then you kind of swooped in, because that's what makes this story and this book interesting, is that tabletopping, I feel, is gained a lot of attention and is kind of back and being popular. And I consider D&D tabletopping.
Yeah, no, 100% it is. She was actually created in 2014, right when the company was created, because we're actually about to hit 10 years next year. And so, I had gotten to know tabletop a little bit amongst us and our friends, but it was my wife that really showed me that there was so much more, especially her working in a game store at the time, before owning her own. And then right after that is when our store was open when the Stranger Things debuted. So I remember having one of the stand-ups in our store, and so yeah, that definitely brought in crowds looking for D&D and just looking for Stranger Things merchandise. And so by the time we were out of it in 2018, I didn't get to see any kind of decline. But yeah, I when COVID rolled around 2 years later, then I definitely saw it increase. And this had already kind of been in the works as it was, so now it's coming back around. It's going to be interesting, trying to see how to do that kind of crossover, right? Because it's a comic, but it's dealing with a tabletop subject matter, and there is some crossover there for certain stores that actually carry both. So,
and then to go even further into this is that obviously, I want women to buy comics. I want young girls to be into comics. I want young boys to also be in comics. I'm a huge wrestling fan, and I love women's wrestling. I love wrestling in general, but I love seeing women's wrestling, and I love seeing good women's wrestling in particular, where I had probably one of the best female wrestlers in the world on my show, Billy Starks. Unbelievable, beyond talented, and I love seeing women getting their just time and putting on great matches. Right now, I think Rhea Ripley is one of the best WWE superstars in that company, and by far she is the best women's wrestler at the moment in that company. And that could be controversial, and I'm happy to debate anybody, anytime, anywhere on that topic. But what is that like? Because I do think it is interesting, because your first book obviously has a female character in centric, but this one is definitely where I feel like Malalia is carrying this book. And she is the star. And I think it is important to show that. And especially with tabletopping, because, and I might say something controversial, but I feel like it's been a male-dominated entity for a very long time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, when we were talking about the mascot of the store, we'd come up with different ideas, and my wife, it was very important to her that Malia be a female, because she's like, we need more female like superheroes, was what she was saying at the time. And now, I mean, she's kind of evolved beyond that. She's more, it's more of an adventure, right? It's and yeah, it's her, and I mean, she's got a group of friends too. So hopefully in one of those characters, some kid out there can see themselves in that, because they're all going to be in the adventure at some point. And hopefully, that, I mean, Roy and I grew up like on, 80s movies, 80s cartoons, just real quick, actually, just the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from the 80s is one of the inspirations for the story, because of that idea of kids being sucked into that world and having to survive. And then the other part is the never ending story, because I always loved that idea that as people in the real world don't believe in Fantasia, Fantasia starts to fall apart. Well, this here it was, they're not playing the board games anymore because Troll's messing them up. So Malia's job is to somehow fix the game and people start playing again. So it's kind of like what you were saying, like in the real world, that, what's the explanation for that decline and what's she going to do to bring it back up? So people always thought that was a pretty meta thing when you have a store and you're like, well, if you buy some more games, you'll save the Tabletopian realm. So but yeah, it's fun. It's fun to set it up that way.
And then we're also going to, to dive in further into that as well, where I just think it's also really important when you're creating because I view your book as an anthology. That's how I view it, where you have 3 stories, and I don't think that they're interconnected at the moment. That doesn't mean they can't be at some point or whatever it is or whatever you're going to do. But obviously, I think it is important when you do an anthology to have different books that hit different topics, and obviously having that superhero thing, but then having a D&D type vibe, and then obviously we're going to talk about the third one in a second. But what is that like to have? And the reason why I'm focusing on this is that I hate to say this, but it has changed. And again, I might get some flack for this, but women in comics is a very new thing, as far as more women artists involved, more women in comic shops, and it is a recent thing because it has been a male dominated world, and obviously things are changing, and I think there's more representation. And given the fact that you want something for everybody, right, from a business level, you want a product that fits everybody if you're a good business. And so I feel like your first one, that story obviously hits the superhero vibe. This one definitely hits a D&D vibe, but also a young girl or a young woman might say, cool, that could be me, and that represents me there. And I think that's, a selling point. I think it's really important. I don't think that you have gotten enough credit for that.
Oh, well, if I can jump in real quick, I think it's
challenge me. You can challenge me. You can throw down a flag. Be my guest.
So like Joe and I, we grew up in the 80s. So I think a lot of that had a huge influence, even if it was subconscious. Because honestly, like I said, originally it was Average Joe and it was about him. And it just clicked, just watching movies growing up. So like for me, whenever I think of this main character, Ava, even though she is technically a villain from her perspective, a good story, the villain always pictures themselves as the hero. So still, she is a hero archetype. And I think a lot of influence for her would be like Ellen Ripley from Aliens or Sarah Connor from Terminator, the strong female lead who, can do everything a guy can, and more, and we wanted that to be, as the story developed, a thing with her. She's very independent. She's very smart. She, like I said, she adapts to the situation. So, it kind of just all, that's why I'm saying it all kind of clicked. It all fell into place. Once we did that, everything just seemed to really meld together nicely. And, it just took off from there. So, and also, with Joe's, with Millie Mayhem, this very positive, I think, strong female, character. I think, it's the same thing. I think it's not something that I see a whole lot either. And I think I go back to like Image Comics and Marvel and DC. There are a couple in there, but nothing really like this. So, and until you really said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's true. It's kind of funny, but yeah, it's a
new thing in comics.
Yeah,
We look at a company where, Zenescope has strong female leads, but we look at companies, we look at Marvel, we look at DC. Hell, we look at Image. There are problems with a lot of these companies. I'm a big anime Miyazaki fan, and he writes women badly. I hate to say it. I don't think he writes them horrendously, but he doesn't write them good. And there's plenty of people, even Shinkai in the anime world does not write women great. And there's plenty of mangas that do that. There's plenty of comics that don't do it well. And if we're gonna really break down stuff, there's plenty of movies that don't do it well. SAO wrote Asuna the first 12 episodes beautifully, probably one of the strongest female characters, and they threw her down and about in the last 12 of the first season. It was a disaster. So it is an issue and it is rare at this point to have strong female characters in anything. I mean, it's complicated to have strong male characters too right now. I mean, to be honest, and there's something to be said about doing that and targeting and providing and filling in that gap. I'm not saying anybody has to be perfect all the time on it, but there is something to be said about at least trying.
Yeah, definitely.
But we're going to talk about this because I think it's interesting in a second also. But I want to mention the third one, which is Teen Strike as well. And that one focuses on a bunch of teenagers and friends from a small South Texas town. And they got superpowers. And I'm going to say this the nicest way. They're figuring out how to be superheroes and dealing with stuff and addressing stuff. And what is that like? Because this is kind of a coming of age story. It's a coming of responsibility, and there's a lot of stuff in play. And they're trying to figure out if they're going to make it to homecoming. It's just really funny because it's like, but I guess it's a real threat because if you just got superpowers and you're 16, no offense to anybody who's 16. I was 16 once. I think you two were 16. You're kind of a dumb 16-year-old sometimes, and you don't know any better, and you don't have wisdom, and it's kind of like this could really, really end badly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll share a little bit, and I'll let Roy take it over. This one actually goes back further than me, because this is actually a collaboration with Dinosaur Entertainment. It's a video game company that's owned by one of our best friends. His name's Jesse Sosa, and he has been doing video games for well over 23 years. I think he just hit. And so when we got into making comics, him and Roy, they went to high school together, so they've always had this idea for Teen Strike. And it was, it's one of those books, kind of like we mentioned earlier with some of our others. Your friends in it. So a lot of their friends from high school are represented in that book. And then people like me, who they met later in life, we kind of got drafted in later. So it's kind of an amalgamation of people who they've met over the years. And so the idea of Teen Strike, well, first off, setting it in South Texas where we all grew up. I mean, we didn't go to high school together, but we lived from like 3 hours from each other or something, so we're all Hispanic. We're all from that same culture. So I think that's why when we met in college, we just clicked, because even though we experienced different things, it was the same. A lot of similarities, a lot of the things that we experienced only in our culture down there. So putting that into this book and taking a group of kids, kind of like us in the late 90s, early 2000s, like, what would that be like? And it was one of those things where Jesse and Roy were like, well, what is it like? Most of the movies, like take the first Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, right? Those opening scenes, like when he saves Mary Jane in the cafeteria, he catches her tray, and all those little cool moments. And then that's usually over within the first act of the movie, and then we can move on to the bigger world threatening things, right? So we were like, well, why don't we stay in that first act a little bit longer? Like, that happens. Funny little things like that happen. You go have the big fight, but then the next day you got to go back to class. Maybe you almost died yesterday, and now you got to listen to a boring speech about history, a part of history you don't care about. Like, what is that really like for a 16-year-old? And so that's what we wanted to do. That's a little bit different with Teen Strike, is that, we didn't want to forget that fun aspect of, well, what is it really like? And then when it gets serious, how do you deal with that and not lose that innocence? How can you still have fun with your friends and being a teenager like we always wanted to? Like, I'll hand it off to you on that one, Roy.
Yeah. So, like he was saying, like Joe was saying, it's kind of funny because it's like we start off with like these everyday problems, that every kid, teenage kid encounters. Everything from dating, what to expect, and who likes who, the love triangles, and kind of the bickering between cliques and stuff like that. And then you add on that dynamic of, well, now I've got superhero powers. Like, what am I going to do, and what's it going to do to us on that level? So, yeah, it was just something fun that we just kind of drew. They say write what you know. We wanted to do something that we actually put scenarios or situations within the story of stuff that actually happened, but then we just put that superhero spin on it. So these friends, these best friends, are all grown up together. Like Joe was saying, they're all from this really small town, which it's kind of neat to put that out there because we're actually using the real life town as our backdrop for this. And it's really interesting also because not a whole lot of stuff really happens in small towns like that. So to kind of put that spin on it, and just kind of show the world, this is, our town, this is where we're from. And this is the kind of stuff that, we experience minus the superhero stuff. It's just neat to share that. But I like the aspect. We really like the idea of how, like Joe was saying, you fight the big world things, but then you come back and, like you said, you gotta, what am I doing for prom? What am I going to wear? What are, all those things, the school dances, everything that we all went through. And I think that's where it really connects with just about everyone, because like you said, everybody was 16 at one time, and hopefully because of the number of characters in this and the different personalities, maybe readers will see, hey, that's me. That's who I was, what character am I, and how does, and it just kind of draws them in, hopefully, and they can just follow this story as we tell it, or as Jesse's telling it in this case. So yeah.
And what is this like too? Because obviously it is a collaboration, and if you have video game, I guess, mindset into it meets comic mindset into it, that creates a very unique blend. Because I hopefully, I'm not saying anything that's out of bounds here, but a movie has a bunch of different toolkits than a book has, than a comic has, that a video game has. And then when you start mixing and combining and saying, cool, I understand that you can't do X in a comic book that you can do in a video game, but what if we can bend it a little bit and we get that vibe in there? And all of a sudden, you now have a weird idea or a weird hybrid type element to it. What is that like? Because I think that's also what's going on right now in comics in a lot of ways, is that we have a lot of stuff cinematic being introduced. We have a lot of stuff of more, prose-esque. And we have a lot of blending of media hitting comics at the moment. And so what is that like? Because obviously when you do have video game input into a comic book, but it's not a video game, you get a weird blend and it creates a different experience.
Well, I can say one thing for sure. If you talk about blending the two, like taking his expertise in video games and applying it to this, one thing that he did to start, how you storyboard a movie. So he 3D modeled each of the characters first. And his original intention was to do a comic book to where he would take those 3D models and position them and just basically use the same program they use for video games, to where they just move the camera around the character. And then once he had the pose that he wanted, then he would add the background. And he experimented with that a little bit, but then I think in the end he was like, you know what? I just want it to look like a comic book, like this will almost look like a CGI still, what I'm doing. He's like, but I want it to look like a comic. And he could have done it himself if he wanted, but he actually hired a comic artist to do it. And Jesse's actually going and adding the colors that you saw there in the preview pages. So I guess in that respect it was a little bit different. And I mean, he's one of the art directors. So that way he has that eye for, how to set up a scene and how to, change it up.
Let's actually talk about this, because obviously this to some degree is also a real advantage, because if you have a 3D model of a character, let's not even talk about all the characters or the 5 top characters, you can get an idea of what they're going to look like from an artistic standpoint on how it's done. And you can say, cool, if they're shooting a gun and they're leaning back and they're tilted at a 45-degree angle, it's going to look like this. That is not the shot I want. So great, now I get to play around with it versus having to draw it and then say, oh, that's not good there. So you can actually kind of try before you buy. And so what is that like? And obviously, I don't think, did either one of you touch the book beyond just putting it out? Or was it all on Jesse and his team to do the book and kind of figure out where they want to go and you guys are putting it out?
I helped him edit it. So I helped him go through the story, and I was basically the editor. And then my wife came behind me, and she's a teacher, so she helps with the story too, but more with the grammar and whatnot.
You get what I'm asking, right?
Yeah.
Because
and then Roy actually helped with the character designs too. So
these are stories, like I said, we did a while back. So some of that stuff is still in there. He's obviously adapted it for the times and stuff. But going back to what you're asking as far as the models and stuff, I think the huge advantage, I'm the artist on How to Hunt a Hero. I can tell you the huge advantage from him being a game developer is that if he can actually take those models and send them to this artist or even himself and look at this and flip it around and move it. So, they've got a true Bible of the character, of how it works. And he can manipulate, like you said, manipulate it into whatever pose he wants. And he's even done like the backgrounds and stuff like that, basically all the sets, if you will. And it's a huge, huge advantage. Me, I'm old school. I'm not a tech person. The way I created, the way I draw How to Hunt a Hero, I actually use, matter of fact, this guy right here, I have to end up using something more like this, where I can take it and I can pose him and I can angle it however I need to. And then I will go in there and, figure it out and basically draw what I see. So I go old school like that. So it's definitely, you kind of get to see like the evolution of it in this book almost. Because, I'm very traditionally trained, where he went way out there into technology.
Let's actually get into this. See, this is where this gets a lot more fun for me. Yeah. So obviously you have 3 different books that tackle 3 different things. And obviously you have a traditional viewpoint where it's drawn, and you have somebody who is using 3D models and then taking that and then drawing and then hiring an art team to do it in comics. And what is that like? Because obviously you're not touching Jesse's lane and Jesse's not touching your lane, but you're on the same product. And so what is that like? Because that's got to be trippy. And then you got the D&D stuff in there. And so what is this like? Because this is why anthologies, in my opinion, work sometimes, especially a true anthology, not a connecting anthology that's weaved through 3 pages that connect everything together. That to me is different. That is a connected anthology versus a raw anthology. I view your book as a raw anthology. I hope that's not an insult, by the way, because it's 3 separate stories that don't interfere with each other, but are done by the same group of people. But what is that like? Because it's kind of a cool experience for a customer, I would imagine. And I think it's a really smart experience, because I might not like a particular book in this, but the other story I might like, and it carries the book or it makes the sale.
Yeah, for sure. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, with 3 different creative teams working on each of the 3 books, it's kind of like you said. I guess everybody kind of stays in their lane, I guess you could say. I know that's usually used in a negative context, but not like this. Like there is crossover because we're all helping in our different strengths, right? So it's like, since I'm the writer, if Roy has a question about something in that story, I can help with that. If Jesse needed designs for Teen Strike, he asked Roy, hey, can you help me with some of the designs? So there was the crossover there. So it's more like kind of like the old, we're not all in the same spot, but kind of like the old Marvel bullpens you always hear about, where everybody's talking, and of course we're using technology to talk to each other, but everybody's got their hand in different places. My wife edits all 3 books, so that, I guess in that respect, that's the only link. The link is on the creative side, not on the story. So like you said, if maybe 1 or 2 of the stories appeals to you and the other one doesn't, well then, the book still has things that you want overall. And that's what this book particularly that's on Kickstarter is meant to be, is like, here's 3 things, what would you like, basically.
To even go further into that, obviously somebody might say, look, I don't like this model stuff and I like traditional art. And it's not that the story's bad, but I really like when it's done traditional. I like the creation. I even like the style of how this book is done, because when you're 3D modeling that you're taking into comics, it has a different process. And somebody might say, look, I love the way that book is composed and I love the way this book looks, because it could just be stylistic, right? I bought books that I absolutely love the style on, and the story is horrible, but I'm like, I just want to read this book. I was just referred a book, I think it's Faust. It's not a kid-friendly book. It's everything that it's like Wolverine rated NC-17. I think it is the book. So everything that Wolverine does and Deadpool does, just times that by 100 and make it horrible. You read the book because it's black and white. Apparently, a friend of mine referred me to it. I'm waiting for it to come out in an omnibus and traditional edition by Black Mask of all people, and that company's that's doing it. It's a black and white, beautiful book. You're reading that book for the art, not for the story, but it's a stylistic book for that reason. And so what is this like? Because I think this is the secret sauce with this book is that there's 3 stories, which means you have 3 opportunities to make a sale
Right.
on your book. And I hate to make this about money, but it is about money to some degree, because if you have 1 opportunity, that's great. But if you have 3, that's even better. Sorry for cutting you off.
Well, and to go off that, that's kind of how we, and I don't know if this is accidental or not. I feel like it just seemed to happen. It just right timing, right, place. When we pitched our books, when we started doing the con circuit, one of the great things that we could do is just that, is cross promote. And if, let's say the strategy is, pitch the book. You've got maybe 2 minutes with a person to pitch your idea, like just Shark Tank it, like boom, 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 and they're going to move on. There's a ton of stuff to see. There's so much content. But what really worked, and it kind of just came to be at the Texas Hill Country Comic Con, we kind of set this up almost like where I would start off. I would say, hey, this is book A, How to Hunt a Hero, blah, 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 blah. Give them a real quick synopsis and then go, but I see you have, kids, and, you might actually be interested in this, which is what I love about Child's Play Comics, is that we do have that variety under the banner, so that we can appeal to different ages and different groups. And, there's something for everyone, basically.
To even talk about that, and I'm curious how you two feel about this, is that I don't know how I'm going to say something that might be misinterpreted by everybody who's watching. I create profiles for people. Mm-hmm. And when I do an interview, when I am interviewing somebody on a cosplay level, that is a different profile on a marketing level than somebody in comics. And I don't think it's stereotyping. It's just saying, look, a cosplayer has this type of income, they have this type of attitude, they have this type of thing. And so when I go and market that interview, I have a different approach with a cosplayer than I do with a voice actor, than I have with a wrestler. And I have a different approach with a wrestler who primarily spends time in Texas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska versus spending time up in the East Coast, just because there's different promotions and different groups cater to different areas on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So if you're going to a con that is definitely more D&D tabletop friendly, I don't know if you're catering and changing the pitch, saying, hey, story B is what you want, and that's the key. Or if somebody's walking by your table and they're wearing roll a D20, guess what? I mean, that's kind of, how I would approach it. And I think it's actually really, really smart, especially because I speak to people who have a lot of different books, not necessarily in the same book, but if you have an Oz book and a Marie Antoinette, and then you have, Princess vs. Zombies, my friend Tom Hutchinson does Big Dog Inc., all of a sudden, if he's at Ozfest, he's going to be easily able to sell an Oz book.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's why I think it's really interesting what you've done, because it gives so many business opportunities. And this is why I like anthologies that are real anthologies.
And the other great thing with it, another kind of pitch we had in it was I don't know if it's just us or maybe because we're in this right now, but I feel like there's a lot of people out there who want to do something like this, who maybe just are afraid, it's not going to take off, that nobody's going to like it, their idea, whatever, but what we actually did also is in the back of Middle of Mayhem, Joe set it up to where it kind of laid out, this is how you do a comic book, which was really smart. And even in How to Hunt a Hero, in the back, we've got like the character design and kind of like some notes, like these are like editor's notes and our artist notes, this is and that. And it kind of laid it out to where we could actually talk to people and relate to them on that level as well and say, hey, don't be afraid to do it. we did it, and if we can do it, you can do it too. So it also does lend to that a lot, and I think that was a big appeal. And also the local, being local aspect helps a lot with just talking to people, just relating to them, especially in this area, Central Texas. So there's a lot of different avenues to go through to promote this. Kickstarter being another one. This is our first Kickstarter, so this whole time I've been really nervous about how is this going to go. How do we get this out there? There's
we're going to talk about that too.
Yeah.
I want to table the Kickstarter side and even being local and all and supporting for one thing, because I'm also curious because and this is just my thoughts too, is that I love experimentation, right? I love experimenting relatively cheaply. So I run an eBay business and I bring in retail packages, and my number is 15 bucks. And the reason why it's 15 is $15, $100 for 15 books or 10 is I want to sample and I want to see if your product sells in my eBay store, because I have no problem taking a $10 per book or $100 risk or lower for that matter. I mean, if you want to sell me 20 books for $100, that's a no-brainer for me. If it doesn't sell, I'll chalk it up. It's tax deductible. Great. We move on. It didn't work. But I don't want to buy 50 of your books because I don't want to be stuck with 50 of your books. And so the way I view your anthology, and I'm curious how you two feel about this, is you're testing 3 stories, and let's say it comes back that everybody loves Molly and Mayhem. They think the other 2 stories are good, but it is clear there's a winner. I mean, my question is that would you break off a title out of this anthology? Then when you shoot out issue 1 of this, you replace it with a new idea, and then all of a sudden you're now experimenting, because I've seen people do this. Antarctic Press does this really well, where they test ideas, and I think it's actually smart. And I've seen other people try to do it on Kickstarter, and I think some have succeeded. But I'm curious, has that thought even crossed your mind? Because that to me is also like kind of, an opportunity, because that is where I think we're going with Roy anthologies, especially to launch series.
Yeah, I mean, each of these has their own issues coming out separately anyway. And, since Zero kind of came together almost out of necessity, just because of a way to present it to Kickstarter, I never even really thought about doing like another one, like a Child's Play Comics #1. But I can see what you're saying, like if we had stories that were like 8 pages here, 16 pages there. I mean, this one adds up to 44, which is a healthy little book too, which is another thing we wanted for Kickstarter. It's like we wanted to bring you a nice chunky book, and that's what we did. So yeah, you bring up some interesting points that, I mean, like I said, they all have their #1s.
Because the reason why I bring this up is that you might put out a story that's really good and it's a decent story, but the story can't carry itself individually. If that makes sense, I hate to say it, it's a dose of reality. But if you put it with another story that can't carry itself and sustain itself economically, and I'm not even trying to be mean, it's not a writing problem. Some stories just don't have the pull. I hate to say it, and if you get offended, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm just being honest. But if you put 2 stories that might not be able to sustain pull and fund, but you put them together in the same book, all of a sudden you funded a book, and those stories get to continue. And maybe instead of doing 22 or 24 pages individually, you do 16 and 16. But then all of a sudden, you now get to continue those stories. And that's what I think is that I think this is a creative problem, because I've seen this with comics where somebody has a good concept, but they have to end their story after issue 3. And I'm like, why? Why not try to figure out a way how to make it as a backup in another story? Why not add it into something where instead of doing, 32 pages, you break it up into 16 at the back of another book that is doing well? And that's what I think is just so interesting, because I think you inadvertently put yourself into a very cool position, because where you can do something like this now, where if all of a sudden one of these is struggling, you could move it into an anthology, and then who knows, maybe that just stays as the anthology, and then you get to test 4 more ideas. And now every quarter you're doing something like that, and you're kind of pulling an Antarctic Press a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say either that or like Dark Horse Presents or Marvel Present, like those old ones that had several stories in it. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Because that's how I view it, and I think you struck gold, because I actually think this is great. I mean, I know a bunch of people who have done stuff similar, and I just think it's super smart to actually do anthologies like this. But you brought up another point where, and I do think this is also important, is that you have a 44-page book, and you're coming out swinging. And what is that like? Because I do think if you do your first Kickstarter, you got to go balls to the wall. I really do. Because I think it says, I'm here to play. And I'm not here to be a one-off. And I don't know how you feel about COVID, but a lot of people came in COVID to do campaigns and do comics, and they were one and done. And we're starting to see people who are one and done, or what I call once a year players. And I think it's important where that is getting weeded out. And so what is that like for you guys to say, hey, we're here to play and we're here to stay? Because I think it's an issue right now in comics heavy, where I don't know who to back as a customer, because I don't know if you're going to be here next year. But if you're coming out with a 44-page book, at least you're coming swinging for the fences. And it makes me feel a little better as a customer.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, because obviously most people go for the, this traditional, 22, 24-page comic, and
About 28 right now is the average.
Yeah. So, that was another thing too, pulling all the stories together. We knew we were going to have, a thicker book, and it's pretty affordable too. That was the other thing working with Comics Wellspring is, even though it's a 44-page book, it's not that expensive. I mean, the base one's only $8, and even our variant cover like 10 and 12. So we didn't go crazy with that either, So
yeah, you got a lot of stuff to cover here.
Yeah.
This is interesting. See, I like speaking to people when they first launch a Kickstarter and they're in the impetus and they're in their startup, because I say something where I think that after a while, and if you've been doing 20 of these, I think you forget what it means to start a book, what it means to be closest to your customers. The second you do 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, it's great, but you are now distanced from your customers. If you did 1,500, you are at the base of your customers. And I think it's a very important thing to be closest to your customers. I know customers in my business by their first name, and I know what's going on in their life. Whether I'm supposed to or not on eBay doesn't matter, because I understand who people are. And I understand I'm buying somebody a book, and they're not going to be able to buy this book for 6 months. But when they want to buy it, they're going to buy it heavy. And then be like, you set it aside for me. That makes sense. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've actually, just from the people we've gotten so far, some are people I know, some are people I know casually, some are their creators. I've made sure to shoot them a message, say, hey, I saw you back to our Kickstarter. Thank you so much. And, just show that little appreciation goes a long way.
But I do want to touch upon something where obviously you guys are doing a book that is a child's book and a children's book and old age book. And that's also a different beast collectively as well. And I just had Christy Shin on, and she does Demon Bitch, and she has a child component next to that, Demon B and Mr. F. We all know what those 2 letters stand for. Best friends.
Yep.
I just want to make that crystal clear. But it is a different beast. I had Rob Motari on. I don't know if you know who Rob Motari is.
Yeah, I've seen both of them.
Mm-hmm. And obviously his book, what is it, Wolf Pups?
The Wolf Pup, yeah, I backed that one.
I don't think it made it. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it did.
Did he get to 10,000 on that book?
Yep, he sure did. I followed. Yeah, I got it there at the end.
Great. I did not see that one coming. I thought it was going to be rough. That was a close one. That was a close one. I know his plushie did well, and I wasn't following it, but that's surprising. I'm not because it's not a good book, but I knew it was a struggle. Is the point? So what is this like to be in this space though? Because obviously, children's books and children's comics are really difficult on Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we knew that coming in, and thankfully, because we already had other outlets to sell to that demographic, like our own website, and people already follow us, coming to Kickstarter, we're just kind of adding another piece to that, right? So that's why we set our goal lower, because we knew even after we finish Kickstarter, we already have people that we're going to hit up because we know they're not going to use Kickstarter for whatever reason, but they'll use our website. So when we're done, we're going to have all those orders come in from both sources.
You just touched upon something,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you even realize what you just touched upon. You just explained that Kickstarter, in my opinion, and I'm going to explain this to everybody who's watching it, because I'm going to cut this clip up. It's brilliant what you just explained. Is Kickstarter is just a funding round, and this is where I think you just explained one of the biggest problems in comics and crowdfunding is that people view Kickstarter as the be all end all, when in reality, it is only the beginning. Meaning that when I ran my campaign for my podcast, what people didn't understand is that I was coming in already funded from other sponsors, and it was just for year 2 and year 3 and other components where it was just a funding round. And I think this is the mistake that people make. And I think you mentioned something where you have your website, you have probably retails that you're calling, you have cons to sell at. And this is just saying, hey, cool, can we get $500 to print our book? Can we get $1,000 to print our book? Can we get a distribution on Kickstarter? Because maybe somebody's going to come across this and say, cool, this book is on Kickstarter. Great. I would have not have known about it before. And I think that's something that is so crucial, and that even some top creators could pay attention to.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Like I said, I've obviously been learning from a lot of different people too, and trying to see, trying to learn from other people's both successes and failures. So,
But I do want to talk about the Kickstarter stuff though, because obviously you both are brand new. I am somewhat brand new as well, where I ran one. So obviously, what is this like? Because Kickstarter is fun, but also intimidating. You're also putting out a project where I hate to say this, you could get nothing. and it could be demoralizing. I mean, there were days, and I don't know how much you know about me, but that month of January was not a fun month for me. And there were plenty of days where I poured myself an extra large Jack and Coke. There were a few of those, not counting my birthday. That one I get a pass on. But there were a few of those. So what has this been like? Because I don't know how your personalities, but I'm looking at it, I'm saying what's going on. And I mean, I hustled for every fucking dollar during mine. And what has this been like? Because it is a very stressful and emotional time.
I'll let you take this one, Roy. I know you mentioned a little bit of it earlier.
Yeah, no, definitely. I had anxiety going into this for sure, especially it being the first one. But again, one of these things that I think was really neat, having multiple projects under multiple companies under this, is that we actually helped each other out quite a bit. So Joe kind of really handled the brunt of it. Like, he did the research, like he said, learning from successes and failures. He has a really good, he's very adept at understanding that aspect of it. And then where, he basically delegates, well, how can we pull our resources and make this successful? So little things, just like advertising, hustling, just getting the word out. Then, like Jesse, lending a hand, he would kind of help us design some of our kind of our ads in there and make it, really pop based on his experience, like what works, what doesn't work. Even pointing out stuff that he's like, well, maybe let's change this. I see you did this, but let's do this instead, and we just kind of we just go in circles and we figure out what worked. And, but in the end, yes, it was watching it and just kind of putting it out there. You're putting yourself out there. Are people going to Are they going to connect with us? Are they going to like it? But this is definitely, I think, for all of us, a passion project. It's something we all wanted to do. So we understand, the risks, and we have a lot of stories to tell, but these are the ones that we really wanted to get out there. And I think we felt had the best chance or opportunity to take off, in this collection. But Joe, as far as your side.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like I mentioned, just trying to learn everything. I mean, I took a good year or so just learning as much as I could from different people, and seeing Kickstarter, some fun, some not, and trying to figure out, well, why didn't they, and yeah, just even up until launch, having other creators that I had come to trust, reviewing it and be like, well, maybe you should do this instead, or maybe you should consider that. So yeah, it's all the different aspects just coming together. And yeah, I mean, in that it was nice to fund so quickly, and now it's just a matter of, well, we can't just sit back and take a breath. Now we still have 28 days, and now it's about building, right? It's like you want to build it more.
Let's actually talk about that too, because there's a bunch of schools of thoughts on Kickstarter. There's asking for what you need. There's also saying ask for a low goal, ask for what you think is appropriate, or ask even a little bit below what you need, because obviously, I mean, everybody is different in Kickstarter. Some people are doing this where half the book's done and they need $4,500 to print it and get the other half done. And so they can't really, on a business level, force to, take a hit, right? Because they don't have other venues, or they didn't self-fund this, or they're going to pay themselves back after the fact. So that's some people's business model, where everything's paid for. They just needed to print the book, and then their goal is to get their money on the back end. Other people have half the money now, and then they use Kickstarter to get the other half. And also some people say, look, I could do this by myself, but I would like $3,000 just so that I can have a bit of a safety net. And so you guys funded very quickly, and you're fully funded because your goal is at $100. And so you took, obviously, saying, set my goal low and fund, and now we're funded, we're successful on Kickstarter. Because if you fund on Kickstarter for $100, I mean, you funded on Kickstarter for $100 and you had a successful project, as far as the funding goes, and you can't deny that. So what was that like? Because I do think it is important to understand that there is strategy going into Kickstarters.
Yeah, no, our goal was 300, and the way I came up with that was, we have 4 variant covers, right? Comics Wellspring requires that we print 25 copies of each one. So I know that's already, that's already how much money we need to print those books. And then we had a few extra things like some swag and whatnot, but that's not that expensive to get. So really that's how I came up with that. It was just, this is literally the minimum that Comics Wellspring is going to ask for us to print. And then from there, we just kind of add it as we go. And so that's how I figured out that goal. Everything else, all the costs for the art and whatever else, that's just kind of, our own investment for now. And yeah, we'll make it back a little over time, because, I had to tell myself, well, I'm going to continue to sell copies of this just like we did the previous issues, and they'll always be available. So there'll always be new people discovering them, and so there'll be new sales. And so it's a marathon in that case. Some people want to run the sprint and make all their money back, like you said, right away, and some of them do, but not everybody does. And so that's why we decided to go the route of, let's just focus on the print, the printing, because once it's printed, it's real, and we can ship it and somebody can get it. And then we're not playing this, well, we didn't even get enough, we didn't print it, like some people get into that rut where it's like they can't even print the book. So we didn't want to get to that point.
I mean, let's call what it is. I mean, how many projects have you both backed?
Mine's pretty up there because I have a mixture of a lot of things, almost 70 on my end. So
how many comics, like board game wise? There's a reason why I'm asking.
Oh, the vast majority of that is board games and comics.
So
Yeah.
over 50.
Oh yeah, easy. Yeah.
What about you, Roy?
I'm actually relatively new at this. Joe actually, introduced me to it. So
We're not holding it against you.
oh no, not at all. I understand. I'm new to it, so like I said, I'm really new to it, honestly. And what's really neat that this I think is kind of the coolest aspect for me, standing outside the box looking in, is that the ones that I backed are actually something that Joe has sent me, or maybe some of the creator that I've been following on Facebook or Instagram, where I just really love their work. Matter of fact, one of the artists that did one of our variant covers, that's kind of how I got to know them. Was I followed them on Instagram. They put out a couple Kickstarters, and I love art books, sketchbooks, anything with art. I love collections. So I saw that, and once that happened, I reached out to them. And I was really worried. I was like, I don't know if this is normal or weird or what, but hey, I'm doing this project, and I would love to have your artwork, featured on our cover. One, as a fan, but two, because I know just how good it is. But it was through Kickstarter. Honestly, I'd probably say like 20, maybe. And I think they're all either a art book or a comic book, but a lot of them also through word of mouth. Joe is really good about sharing. Hey, check out. He knows what I like, and he's like, I think you might like this. In our conversations, and I'll check it out. And yeah, sure enough, that's how it works. And so I'm glad to see that it's continuing even in ours. It was just word of mouth.
The reason why I asked this is that you mentioned about printing errors and ruts and things of that nature. I mean, I backed, I think, like 85, 90. So I don't back a lot of projects. I'm very selective, and sometimes I back heavy. And like I back projects like $400 or $500, no questions asked. For certain things, obviously some retail stuff is in there, some other stuff's in there. So that's why. But one of the things is that there's delays right now in a lot of this, and I hate to say it, but there's real problems with all of Kickstarter. I mean, I don't know how many books you guys are waiting for that are considered to be late. So I have a different definition than late. My definition of late is 6 months after when you said it was going to be delivered. That is my definition of late. I think that is more than generous. I do. Some people disagree with me. I think if you say your book's going to be in my hands in May of 2023 and it is October, I think you are late. I don't think you're super late. I think if by February of 2024, you are super late. And if your book is not in my hands by June of 2024, when it was supposed to be in my hands in May of 2023, I have a 20% chance of getting your book. That is how I calculate it. And that is a real problem. So that's one of the things that I think is one of the biggest problems on Kickstarter. And the reason why I bring it up is that I don't know if you've experienced those problems yet, but also that's what prevents me from returning to people on Kickstarter is when they have those issues. And they happen a lot more than people say, oh, no, that doesn't happen. No, it happens. It happens. I'm owed a lot of books from a lot of people, both in the mainstream and in comics and indie comics right now. A lot.
I think that's where we kind of have an advantage, or maybe just the experience, call it experience, where we've actually done this. Like Joe was saying, we actually have done this before, and we've kind of found all the little, so far, I mean, knock on wood, issues that we run into. But, this is something, that's the thing we said. We wanted something that was done, like complete. And we wanted to be able to provide something like guaranteed. I mean, I know people hate to use that word, but we work with Comic Wellspring, and they're very, very good at customer service. If we have any issues, if we had a con and we're like, we need it by this time, this date or whatever, they put a rush on it and they've gotten it to us. So I can definitely toot their horn as far as that. But and I think that was also kind of the goal. I don't know, Joe, you want to talk to this, but we're just basically looking at the amount we need to print the books. That's it. And it's done. And we don't have to stress out about, oh man, are we gonna be able to get this to the customers on time? What we promised. We know it's done. Like this is done. But Joe, you can talk more on that if you want, as far as the printing itself.
Yeah, because we've actually done 3 rounds of pre-orders through Comics Wellspring over the last couple of years, all on our website. Just a traditional style. It's like, hey, for 2 weeks, you guys can pre-order on our website. We build up the pre-orders and then we cut them off, and then we send it off to Comics Wellspring. Order a few extra so that we can put them up on the site. And we've done that 3 times over. And then, like Roy mentioned earlier this year, trying to get to the con, they were like, oh, well, it's going to be there by this day. I'm like, that's after the con. Like, we need it before. And they stepped up and they did it. But it's just that communication. So now with them doing this Kickstarter for us, it's going to be a no-brainer. I mean, unless we end up with thousands of books ordered, but even what we have so far, it's going to be just fine. They're going to get it to us, and our hope, we have a projected date of February, but our hope is to get into people's hands sooner. We gave ourselves enough lead time just in case.
Right. Based on that experience, yeah.
And then to even go further, because obviously your books are not that expensive, all things considering. They're relatively affordable. And I'm going to say the elephant in the room. Comics are expensive. I'm sure you've seen cover A's for $20. I've seen it. I've seen cover A's for $25. And it is hard sometimes to back a $20 book. And I personally like books when they're like $12, $15. If it's a variant, I don't have a problem if it's done by an artist I like spending $20 or even $30. But there's plenty of times that I've walked away. And I don't know if you've ever walked away from somebody's campaign saying, look, all your books are $30 and I really like this thing, but it's a little too pricey for me. It's a little too rich for me is a good way to put it. And so what is that like because I think your first book is $8, then you have a $10, you have a $12, and then you might have like another $10, I think. So I think you have 2 10s, 1 8, and 1 12. Like, what is that like? Because let's face it, in reality, people right now are being hit hard by inflation, the economy. People are very concerned about it. I could tell you, as somebody who has money in the stock market, it is a very trying time and an unnerving time. For me, just personally. Also, money's getting tighter, where I think money is coming out of the system. And on top of it, we're heading into the holiday season where Christmas is here. I'm sorry, we've decided to skip Halloween and Thanksgiving. Don't worry. You're not. No, actually, technically, the Lions are pretty good on football. So I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry. No. We didn't skip those holidays, but we are in Christmas shopping mode technically at the moment. So what is that like to make your books affordable? Because it is complicated when you have affordable options.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, coming from the background of always having to manage finance in one aspect or another, whether it be at my old job or at the store, this was just that again. It was like, okay, Comics Wellspring has a great system on their website to show you this is how much it's going to cost to make this book at this many pages and whatever features you want to add to it. So then it was a matter of like, okay, what's the cover A going to be? It's going to be the most affordable one. There's a no brainer, right? And then the variant covers is like, well, there needs to be a little bit more, but let's not go crazy, because it's our first Kickstarter. So, I've definitely seen variant covers by well-named artists that are pretty high up there. And I mean, the artist we have for cover D is Eddie Nunez. He does work for DC and came from Wildstorm back in the day. So, we could have justified trying to charge more for his, but we were like, no, it's our first one. It'll be the highest of the variants, but overall, and then on top of that, we have the tier where you can get all of them plus some swag. So we worked in a little bit of a discount for that too. So, it was just a matter of literally just sitting down with and figuring all that out, weighing packages, figuring the shipping, like everything. Like I tried to not leave any stone unturned with that, because I'm not gonna lie, even through our own website, I've made mistakes on the first few pre-orders. I didn't weigh the the package right, or maybe people ordered multiple copies and it was like, oh, well, maybe I should have charged a little bit more for shipping on that, so thankfully having our own website, I was able to make those mistakes on our own.
Right.
And Kickstarter, because of course Kickstarter takes their own cut and all that, we've already factored all that in too, because Wells Comics Wellspring helps with that. So yeah, it was a lot of sitting and figuring before we launched.
Yeah, and then obviously, I mean, these are some of the covers. I think this is some of the covers. So that's cover C. I believe that's cover B. And then I think this is cover A, and I don't have cover D by Eddie. Unfortunately, I just forgot to copy and paste it and take it from your website. So that's on me, but it exists. It exists. I do want to make that crystal clear. And then obviously you have some other stuff as well where you have a retail package that I think is 5 copies. So I think you have 2 cover A's, a cover B, C, and D for $29. And so obviously there is some room for somebody to make money. And this is a whole another discussion that I have another show. And at some point, we're all going to talk about this issue, which is retail packaging. Because as somebody who sells books, there are plenty of people who do not understand retail. I need a 50% discount, minimally 50%. And technically speaking, I need like a 60% discount. In reality, because it is brutal out there, especially on new properties. And also my biggest pet peeve is, and I'm just going to say this openly, is when I don't get to pick what I want for my store. So on campaigns, there are books that I don't want, like cover C, for instance. Not yours in particular, but when somebody tries to sell me 6 covers, I'm like, look, you got to understand that 3 of these are going to sit around and do nothing. But your cover D will sell like wildfire. I have no problem paying a premium for your cover Ds because I can make real money. And that's what drives me crazy with retailers, is that they don't want to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Be mad.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I mean, when you're talking about that big discount, that 50% discount, give me PTSD dealing with Diamond, because I remember that back in the day, because the system they had back then, you got that 50% discount when you first signed up with and a bunch of free graphic novels, so that way they could give a head start. But that went away within, I think it's 3 months, and then it goes down to like 30%, and then only if you ordered a bunch would they knock you back up to the 50%. So that was always a struggle. So
it is very complicated, and it is most people do not have conversations with retailers. And I'm an eBay store, so eBay takes 13%. And that's what everybody doesn't understand, why I need a 50 to 60% discount. Or you got to offer me something, because if I'm taking a risk on your book and your book trades for 20, 25 bucks, I mean, we got to be at $12.50 minimally. Minimally. I mean, I can't go below. I mean, if you're going to sell me a $25 book for $15, there's no money. And I hate to make this conversation about money, but it is in my business. That's why on retail, I don't deal with certain people, because they just don't get it. It's a problem. It's one of the biggest issues, is that I think people in Kickstarter don't understand retail. And I think whatever they don't understand, that you need to figure out your numbers that work so that my numbers can work. And there you go. Not you in particular. I mean, I'm not saying you in particular, but I'm just saying in general. And I think it's a real issue. And obviously, this is why I think it's more interesting bring this full circle about how you're coming in from a business standpoint. And that's where I think you have a real advantage, going beyond just writing and creating a story, is that you understand what it means to run a business. First thing, coming in saying, I'm going to go create comics. And I think that there's a misconception, and feel free to disagree with me, that there's the business side of comics, which is like business. And then there's the comic creation. And those two things are massively separate. There's any business, to me, and this is just my thought, is that we're just changing parts out on how it operates. A comic business does not operate the same way an automobile business operates. but components of it operate the same way, where you're going to have equipment or you're going to have upfront costs when you buy comics or make comics. And so that's just my take, but I digress. I'm not going to pontificate here.
No, you're like I said, you're definitely hitting it because,
Yeah.
like I said, we dealt with that at the store, and it's the same thing here. You just got to figure out what's the cost so we can keep doing this. I mean, people can keep throwing their own money at it a long time too, but at some point, at least attempt to make your money back. So
that's the part that I think people don't understand. I have a business that I take capital out of my business. I take a distribution, so I don't get paid in my business. I get a distribution. It is extraordinarily advantageous when you get to take a distribution out of your business versus getting payment. Because equity, if you run a good business, is so much sweeter than a paycheck. And I get a paycheck for my day job, and I like my paycheck because my healthcare is worth my paycheck. Yeah, I mean, hey, I live in America, guys, so I'm well aware that having employer healthcare, even though it costs you an arm and a leg, is worth every goddamn fucking cent. Especially when you have a massive expensive surgery that's in the 6-figure range. So that's all I'm gonna say. That's the best investment of 2023. I can tell you that. I paid way less in premiums than my surgery cost. Way less. But I digress right there. But I do want to back out of this, and I do want to actually talk a little bit about the industry and how you guys feel about it. And you both are new, and I'm curious how you feel about the health of comics right now, because we are in a weird time on campaigns. And I was alluding to this before a little bit, where I think some campaigns are doing great. I think some people are doing great, but I also think a lot of people are struggling. I think a lot of people aren't funding as fast as they once were 2-3 years ago. And I think a lot of projects are barely making it across the finish line. And so I'm curious how you two feel about it, or maybe you don't really know because you're just brand new. I mean, and that's fine too. I mean, I'm just curious where you guys are seeing, because I see something where I just feel that a lot of shifts have happened for a lot of reasons, but I don't know if we're in a healthy indie comic environment anymore.
I mean, I know I've seen some things, Roy, but I don't know if you have, because we kind of look at it differently, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see a lot of the conversations that are going on out there, a lot of the debates. Since we're just coming into it, like you said, we're coming into it in a more unique point of view because of the way we're doing it, because we're not treating Kickstarter as the end all be all. So we basically just coming into it, setting our goals that are right for us, right? And I'm not just talking monetarily. I'm like, goal number 1, get on Kickstarter, did it. Goal number 2, get it funded on Kickstarter, did it. What's the next goal? Build it. It's like, so whatever problems are going on out there, obviously each creator is going to have to deal with it on their own. And all the things you've already mentioned, the economy, the inflation, like Kickstarter itself, like whatever it is that they're dealing with, they're each going to have to do it just like we are.
Let me ask a follow-up, and then I'm curious what Roy's opinion is. Do you feel that a lot of people on Kickstarter, a lot of creators have grown, and now they expect like a 40% growth every single time they do it, when they were starting off doing 500 and then they did 1500 and then they were 1500, and that their growth rate is unexpected? Because if you have, it's easy to, if you did a Kickstarter and did $100, and it's easy to go from $100 and have 100% growth rate to $200. But it's a little bit harder, I think, to go from $200 to $400, but it's not ultra hard. So if you do 10 Kickstarters and you're just doubling, but you started at 100, that growth rate is insane. I mean, that's 100% growth rate every single time. But I don't know if that's sustainable, and I don't know if that's what's affecting this, where maybe the problem isn't that you did 15,000, but then the next campaign you did 16,000, but you went from doing 8,000 to 15,000. So you had a huge J curve growth, but now your growth is only going by 1,000. They're saying, well, I'm failing because my growth rate is now 8%, but 8% is the norm. You know what I mean? And because I don't know if that's the debate, because I stay out of this stuff because I'm not in this space. But like, that's just what I'm thinking, is that maybe the problem isn't that. Maybe people had abnormal growth rates and now the growth rates are stabilizing.
I mean, that's definitely possible. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you trade the stock market. I mean, so do I. So, it's
I don't trade. I invest.
You invest, yeah.
I don't trade at all. I have no desire to trade. I am horrific at trading. I want to make this crystal clear. I invest in dividend stocks and S&P 500 good growth mutual funds, and I hold for 5 to 10 years because I am a shitty trader. Shitty trader at best.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna sit here. I stay in my lane, but I wait for bad deals in which that, like, I'll throw something out there where if a stock normally trades a great stock, I'll throw it out. Coca-Cola. If Coca-Cola is trading at a 10%, below where it should be trading, I'm buying it all day.
Yeah.
Or I mean, COVID hit and Texas Roadhouse was at like $90 or like $70, and then I bought it at 32, and then it rode all the way back up. So I wait for bad days in the market. I am an investor. I am terrified of trading. But I get excited at this topic. But continue your point. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I meant investing because basically you
can trade. I'm fine with you trading. You can
trade.
No,
I don't. I invest too. I mean, but my point is that you know that there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? And so, like, whatever is happening now is just something to deal with. Like, and you can't. It's kind of like when we decided to do the first comic back in 2021. I mean, the whole world had shut down, right? And here we are, like, well, what do we do with ourselves? So let's make a comic, But it was something we'd always wanted to do, and we made that decision to do it. And it was in the midst of something that was pretty bad that was going on, right? And now, if there's things challenging on Kickstarter now, whatever it is, that was I just saw somebody post about that today. One of the people I follow, they were like, she said something like, I hate seeing these new creators asking for 10,000 right away out of the bat, their Kickstarter, and they don't really find a way to justify, like, why are they asking for that much? And like I just shared with you, the reason we chose ours was because we just decided we just want enough to print, and everything after that is gravy, but for them, they're obviously trying to cover the cost of the artist and the print and everything else that they've spent up to this point. If you're asking for $10,000 out the bat, so everybody just got to make their own decision of what they can deal with. And like you were just saying about Rob Multari's, you thought it didn't make, and he just barely crossed that 10,000, but he made it, And so
it's not a diss at him. It's not.
No, but
I like Rob. He's been on my show a bunch of times. I have a good relationship with him, but I did not think the thing was going to make it, honestly. And it's not because it's a bad book. It's because it's a really, really tough space. That book. It's just a tough space. It was the same thing with his plushie. It is a tough space. And I'm not saying it didn't hustle. I'm not saying it didn't work, but it is a tough space. And I call a ball, and I'll call a strike. Where if somebody has a tough space to be in, I mean, look at my whole campaign on my thing. That was a tough space too. I mean, I'm not going to pretend what's not easy, what is easy and what is hard. If you do a book that has big-breasted women, fun covers, and you have 4 top artists on that, and you're asking for $3,000, you'll fund. The book could be a disaster, but you'll fund. But anyway, enough about me. I'm curious what Roy thinks. I've been thinking enough, and my voice is getting sore.
Yeah, like I said, I am relatively new to this, and as you're talking about this, not only through Joe do I hear about these Kickstarters, these projects and stuff. I see it as all the books that I've backed have succeeded and blown way past what their goal was. But the other thing I saw, kind of like us, and what appeals to me is I actually, when doing these cons, I like to just walk around and talk to other creators. Whenever we go, even if we're not vendors and we're just there, I will go and talk to these other creators and see what their books are. And I've actually funded more Kickstarters because of that. And I don't know if it's just that, like for me, I worked in sales, I worked in customer service. I like talking. And so when I can communicate directly with the creators, I find that for me, that's more successful than just seeing it on there. But to answer the question, as far as what I'm seeing on Kickstarter, everything that I've seen has just been phenomenal, which is why I was so nervous. I was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to, hit, even though we're starting off low, yes, the goal is to fund the book, and gravy is just proceeds that go back into the book, but being relatively new, I think it looks great. It looks very successful, but I haven't, been in the game that long for it. But I am happy for the success of the creators that have funded. I don't think I've backed anything that hasn't funded at this point. So
I've had a few that haven't made it. Obviously, I've had people come on my show and their stuff hasn't made it. But also I think it goes even beyond that, where I mean the question always becomes is profitability. And I think this is another thing that's a weird term and nobody wants to talk about. Where if you raise $250,000 on Kickstarter, but you only brought in $240,000, you were technically successful, but you made $10,000. So I think this is the other part where it's great that somebody funds, but if you needed $6,000 to get you to the finish line and you did 5,500 and you hit your goal for $5,000, you did well and you did great, but you didn't get to where you needed to be. And I think this is why, we're seeing a lot of shipping delays, a lot of delays right now in Kickstarter and books. I owed a lot of books. I owed about 15 books. Now, some of them are on target and some of them are late, but I think this is part of the issue is that people overshoot and shit happens and things get expensive and then you got to go find another grand somewhere. And I think it's a real issue. And I think, your book is already paid for. That's really what you guys are at right now is your book's paid for, but not everybody's like that. Not everybody can do that. And this is why, and I don't see that problem actually dissipating. I see it increasing. I really do. I'm very pessimistic about this, which means I'm always right.
Good. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
But I'm extraordinarily pessimistic because I just think that unfortunately when money gets tighter, people go and they push it out, and then it's not that you won't get your book. It's just that it's going to take another 4 months, another 5 months. But the longer you take something, the less interested I become. I'm getting a book that I ordered almost 11 months ago has finally been issued a tracking label. 11 fucking months ago. I'm sorry. No, not even 11 months ago. Way beyond that. We're talking 2022. Way beyond that. We're talking last October. It's taken a year for something to come my way. And I'm getting to the point where I'm like, where the fuck's my book?
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that a little bit as a toy collector. So I kind of see that, and this isn't just isolated to independent creators. This is big companies too, where I will order something at least a year and a half out before I will finally see it, and they take that money up front. That money's gone, and fortunately, and again, knock on wood, I haven't been stiffed on any of that. These are things that I'm just like, I'm going to invest in this now. I know I'm not going to see it in for another year, sometimes 2. I've had some that are 2 years out. But I think there is a place for the crowdfunding. I think there is a place for indie comics, big companies. We get some of the stuff that we never thought we'd get. So I am very open to the idea and the concept of Kickstarter and the funding and how that works. But I am also very happy that we decided to go the route of let's have the book done, because it makes, like you said, having confidence in the product, or in us as producing the book, you know, as a customer, you're like, well, I know for sure I'm going to get something. And that's where me and Joe discussed, like, we want this already done. We're not going to promise something and then like try and scramble to get it. No, we want it done. So I am happy that we did that route. And I think that really helps a lot. It takes a lot of stress off, I think, everybody, to be quite honest. I think it's more successful.
No. I get it. In which that I understand. I mean, my whole business is based on buying 20 weeks out. And I'm trying to explain to my mom. She doesn't understand. She doesn't understand that. Why are you spending $200 now? And I'm like, because if I don't do it now, I then can't get it, and then now I don't have merch. It's like, she doesn't understand, and then she sees all this merch coming in. But you guys aren't friends with me on Facebook. About a week and a half ago, I put up a posting. I'm owed almost $4,000 worth of comics. Now, I mean, I'm curious, how many comics do you think $4,000 is worth? How many do you think? How many single issues do you think 4,000 comics is?
I think it depends on the variant. I've seen some those black and white ones go for like $200 sometimes. So I think it just depends on the variants, on what you have of what you're actually getting. Let's say it's just a standard comic. I mean, oh man.
How many issues do you think that is collectively, like floppies? Throw out a number. There's a reason why I'm asking.
I'm trying to think of my collection. I have a pretty vast collection as well. But God.
Yeah, I mean, if they're floppies, you know, if they're regular floppies, $4 each, you would think that that's 1,000 comics, but it's not going to be that.
Yeah, I was going to say something in there. Yeah.
So it's 150 issues.
I was going to say 100. I should have just gone my first instinct.
So I'll break it down. And this is really important because, and this is from 9 months ago collectively. So I'm owed 60 books that trade about 50 a pop on average from Mount Olympus. So that's like $3,000, right? Then I'm owed 15 Steph Wilson covers from a guy named Steve Tanner Hurley, who, and all this stuff's going to be delivered. That's why I feel comfortable talking about this. So that's 15 to 20. I mean, that's up there. Then I'm owed 15 by Eternal Press, which is Dustin Burnell's company. And these are all people I know well enough. And those books trade anywhere from 15 to 30 bucks a pop very easily, depending on what they are. Then I'm owed about 30 books from Tom Hutchinson. So those trade from 15 to 80 a pop. And that's a big spread right there. And then on top of that, I'm owed stuff from Merc Mag. I'm owed stuff from Comics Elite. I'm owed stuff from like Zenoscope. And then there's just a bunch of other stuff. So it's about $400 to $4,500 worth of comics. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm owed a bunch of money in cards. And the reason why is that some of this stuff is 9 to 10 months old. Some of it's even older, which is crazy. And that's not including anything on Kickstarter. And the reason why I bring this up is that I am extraordinarily sympathetic to people waiting for books. I don't think anybody on Kickstarter is waiting for $4,000 worth of comics right now. I don't think anybody is. But my patience is wearing thin. After 11 months, a year and a half, my patience wears massively thin. And so that's where I'm at. And that's why on Kickstarter, you got 6 months after your release date to get me your book. In 6 months after that, you're late. That's just where we're at. And there are people who are actually not allowed to come on my show because they are over a year late. So if you want to get banned from my show, everybody, don't deliver your book. That thing, and I won't have you on my show. I mean, there's 3 ways how to get banned from my show. You openly insult me and disrespect me. You have a massively late Kickstarter. And then the third is that you have publicly said things that you shouldn't have said about just normal things. Those are the 3 ways you get banned from my show. But I digress. That's all I have. But Yeah, we've been speaking for a while. I don't have to speak tomorrow, but my voice is getting sore. This is, I think, hour 3.5 of me speaking today.
Wow.
Yeah. I speak a lot. I interview a lot. But I do want to give both of you a chance to self-promote yourself, your campaign, everything that's going on, where people can find you. So where people can find you, the campaign, all that fun stuff, social media. I don't know who wants to go first.
Joe, hit it.
So I made a custom website, so to take them to the Kickstarter super easy. So it's just childsplaycomics0.com. They spell out the word zero, and it'll take them straight there. And that our profile has all our social medias and stuff. So yeah, we're like I said, we still got 28 days left. So come on down, check out all the covers. You can see the mysterious cover D that we didn't get to see tonight. So
Hey, I was trying. I messed it up.
I'm just messing with you, Andrew.
I'm fine taking the L. I'm fine taking the L. I am perfectly fine. I'm an adult. I'm okay with taking the L.
Yeah, like Joe said, our stuff is on there. I mean, I pretty much just everything I do art wise is going to be on there. My other pages aren't really about that. Most of my stuff is actually toy photography and or just social stuff. But yeah, if you go onto that site, we're pretty much all our stuff is on there. So, but yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thank you so much for doing the interview. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. This is really cool. It's one of my third interview. So, yeah,
and then I'm going to keep saying it. I've been saying it for a while. You have to support indie. What that means is that when people have Kickstarters, you need to back their campaigns. You need to actually pick up a tier, pick up their book, read their book, check out their book, share out their campaign. Yeah. I understand that money's tight. I understand that not everybody's campaign is your cup of tea. But if it's not your cup of tea, but you know somebody who it is their cup of tea, you should absolutely at least share it out. And on top of that, you should actually follow people on social media and engage with them, because that also makes a huge difference when you engage with people on social media, whether that's Twitter/X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, personal websites. I don't know what other social media stuff is out there, but I'm sure there's stuff out there. But I think that those are the main 5, I think. Facebook, if I didn't mention already, I think I did, but I'm going to mention it again. Really, really important to do so, because that also matters. And then as far as I'm concerned, I got a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, I am Pop Anime Comics on Twitter/X. I am Pop Anime Comics on Instagram. I am Pop Anime Comics on Facebook. I am Pop Anime Comics on YouTube. I am Pop Anime Comics on TikTok. Notice a theme here, guys. Notice a theme. I will say this. I am not Pop Anime Comics on eBay. I am Pop Anime Comics Collectibles on eBay. So I decided to add the collectibles there. And I do have an eBay store, and I sell a lot of books, and I sell a lot of cool stuff. So a lot of cool stuff's coming in. And I got some really cool books coming in about 16 weeks. So let's just say that me and Sailor Venus or Jupiter, depending, because I get orange and green mixed up. I think it's Venus. No. It's Jupiter technically. Me and Sailor Jupiter are getting a little sparkly. And that's all I'm going to say. You can interpret that as sexual or unsexual as you want. But I will say this, that it's a super limited, awesome cover, and I'm going to be charging like $100 for it. And there's only 15 of them. And I'm a Gurren Lagann fan, and I got some Yoko Litter covers also looking very sparkly. So those are coming in about 16 weeks. So yeah, those things are going to sell and be ultra sweet. Ultra sweet is a good way to put it. And I'm really, really, really excited for that stuff. I have some other cool stuff coming in, and it's going to come into my shop. You never know. A lot of cool stuff. And yeah, so that's everything that I got. And I will say this. I have 549 subscribers on YouTube, and I'm looking for 550. So whoever wants to be my 550th subscriber, I will be overjoyed. It is not a requirement. I just appreciate when people actually subscribe to me on YouTube and watch something, because I will say this, and I will only say it once till my next interview. You may or may not get smarter by watching me, but you as sure as fuck will be entertained. I can promise you that. There is something for everybody on my YouTube channel, whether it's voice acting, comic creators and artists, cosplayers, wrestlers, adult entertainment, you name it, I got it. So there you go. And on that note, I'm going to give whoever wants the final word.
All right, Joe.
Just come check us out on Kickstarter, childsplaycomiczero.com. Thank you, Andrew, for having us on.
Very much.
I could have said that any better myself, everybody. And that is a wrap.